I think we are. We're going to be live here in a minute. Okay, we are streaming live. Well, welcome to our, I don't even know what segment of the A Day of Light and Love 2020 it is. I do know it's Christmas Day. I've been live streaming every other hour with various women leaders from around the globe. And we've had some amazing conversations today, specifically related to creating the future, like addressing and assessing where we are in order to create the future starting now. And Linda Heller is just a wealth of wisdom. She has been with us on A Day of Light and Love before, and I'm so, like, we could talk for hours, but we're not going to do that here. We're going to keep it more concise. And so I think our discussion is going to be around the stories that we tell ourselves and why it's important in creating the future now, and connecting that to maybe the year that we've been through, or things that we've just been through in this past year or before. But Linda, first, if you can just share a little bit about who you are for people that may not know you, and then we'll pick up the conversation from there.
Well, my name is Linda Heller. I feel like I've been a lifelong student and a lifelong teacher, both. I currently work with the university coaching teachers who are earning credentials. And I love the opportunity that it gives me to bring everything that I learn from my courses with Jeanne, from my courses with Yvonne, from my courses with Chick Mormon, Mark Wolin, and I can bring them all to focus in those coaching sessions. And one of my great passions is languaging. And not in the sense of how great can you write something, but in that deeper, more simple sense of what kind of words do I think with? What kind of words do I describe my life experiences with? And what I learned was that I can create a new future by changing the words I use to describe my experience.
Oh my goodness.
And it changed my life when I found that out. And it's like, so it kind of infuses everything I do, whether I'm coaching teachers or taking a class or whatever. So I love that our conversation ahead of time, as it always does, ranges far and wide. And this idea of, I was reflecting with you on the stories I tell myself about who I am, about how I am in the world. And the gift for me of this past year has been, it is like blowing it up into great big neon letters, that the stories that I've been telling myself all of my life about who I am. Well, I'm not a very social person. I can stay home all the time. I don't talk to anybody for days on end, blah, 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 blah. The stories just go on and on. And as we were talking back and forth, you named something so important, which was, that's true, I can do that. But it's in part, I'll take the but back, in part the reason that I'm saying that's great is because I can choose to do it differently anytime I want.
Yes.
I can pick up the phone, I can go see my friend, I can give them a big hug. We can sit down and have dinner sitting right next to each other, right across from each other. And it's like, what this experience showed me was that when the choice to be alone or to be with others is removed, all of a sudden, I recognized the story I was telling myself wasn't true.
That's so true. So the story you were telling yourself was that you were perfectly fine staying home, and you really didn't need to be around or hang out with
Yeah,
people,
social.
and give me my books, give me my study, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I
absolutely.
mean, every now and then I'll come up for air and have a social moment, but otherwise, this is just who I am, right? And then, and that is amazing. I mean, there's nothing, I mean, it just is what it is. There's no right or wrong.
Right.
However, what you discovered, it sounds like, is that once you realized, like, in other words, you realized it was a choice, because once the choice to do that or to be social was removed and you could only stay at home, it was then that you realized how much you actually missed
Yeah.
that that social interaction, that community
And that's
connection.
the important piece from my perspective is the word community. I am not, all right, I'll reframe that. Normally, I choose my contacts and my connections. Um, I'm very appreciative of the friendships that I've developed. And I am not interested in counting how many friends I have,
Right.
whether it's on Facebook or whatever. And I value each and every one of them. And I think what you're doing, one of the reasons what you're doing today is so important is a couple of the day before the winter equinox. I for several days, I had been feeling sad, which is, and I awoke the day before the equinox with tears running down my face. And the depth of despair and sadness that I felt was crushing. And I made a conscious choice to let myself feel that way. I chose not to distract myself. I chose to let myself feel miserable. And the interesting thing was, though, that in doing that, I gave myself a gift, which was to acknowledge the depth of my sadness. And instead of pretending it was okay.
Yeah.
And once I did that, when I awoke the next morning, on the morning of winter solstice, it was as if the feeling was gone. And in its place, I could feel just like our world is now moving into spring. Every day getting a little bit longer, every day moving towards that point where things are going to bloom and come forth. And it felt, I could feel that within myself.
Wow.
So I realized in that moment, I thought about all the people who tell themselves the same kinds of stories that I tell and more. I'm all alone. I have nobody who cares about me. Everything would be better if I only had a partner. Everything would be better if only. And I feel as if the first step in creating that new future is to let go of that story. That story about what I'm not.
Yes.
I'm not social. I'm not desirable. I'm not interesting. I'm not pretty. I'm not handsome. I'm not whatever.
Yeah, and even releasing the narrative of the I am, because like there have been times, if you're assertive, you heard from when you were young, oh, you're just bossy.
Yeah.
And you hear it, and that's truly not the case at all. You hit somebody's button with your assertiveness, and they reflected back on you something, but then ouch, because it's like non-acceptance, right? But I think we have those things that we say, like one of mine is really coming out. in this conversation. And like I say so many times, like I don't eat kiwi. And people are like, you don't eat kiwi. Because they'll be like, oh, and I'll be like, no, I don't eat kiwi. They're like, well, why don't you eat kiwi? because it's fuzzy.
It's not fuzzy on the inside though.
I know, and I hear that, but it's fuzzy and it's green and it's fuzzy. And I know it's ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous. I have the same thing with like figs and
Yep.
something else. Dates, maybe? I
Yeah,
don't know. I don't want to tell you what they remind me of. And so I've never
oh, good. I can,
been
my
able,
imagination can kind of go
and
there.
my husband loves them. And so he's like, yeah, whatever, you know. Whatever. I'm with the right person because, you know, I can't impact his happiness and his figs and dates. But, you know, I just say that because like I have to change when I change the narrative on that. My future will abound in kiwi and figs and dates. If they were really important to me, though, let me tell you. I mean, because I am kind of being funny, but it's still truthful. I totally being very forthright about those things. But in the past, it was other things.
Yeah.
And those other things actually represented a limiting belief about my own self. And in that limiting that belief, I reduced the potential expansiveness of my essence of who I am because I assigned it something of not enough or too much.
But it's a story.
Yes.
And
oh, and then you could tell why. Exactly.
yes,
The why
exactly.
is the story that carries the darn thing for as long as you carry it.
It's almost like there are two stories. One is the I am or I am not. That's
Yes.
one story.
Yes.
And then the story that people often invest the most in is why.
It's the fuzziness.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Right. Like it made no, it really makes no sense. But the more I tell it, like, well, that's why. Ridiculous.
So it is, I guess if I could share one thing, it was when I consciously chose to change the words I used to describe my life experiences, I changed my life.
Mm.
Life kept happening. You know, it was the same. It isn't that all of a sudden I had a new life. What I learned was that how I talk to myself about my life, how I talk to myself about what's happening, changes my experience of what's happening.
Yeah, and you said it's not a new life, but it really is. It is. It's a fresh experience.
Absolutely. So let's take the big elephant in our living room currently, which is the pandemic.
Yes.
You know, and so there will be people who say it doesn't exist, it's whatever, whatever. And then there are going to be people who say the other. I chose, for me, what I choose to see this as is an opportunity to make a different kind of a choice.
Mm.
So it isn't, for me, it isn't about the government says, I can't go visit my friends. I can't go anywhere without a mask. The government recommends that you don't. But I have free will and I can choose to do it if I want. However, I look at this as an opportunity for me to either honor that I'm connected to every other person in my community or not.
Yes.
So either it's all about me and what I want, or it's all about that I'm part of a human community and what choices am I going to make?
Yes.
That support that connection.
Yes. Which gets into, you know, the ethics of things, you know? Yeah, choosing things that
but that's an example really of how you and I are choosing to take a life experience that everyone has currently, and how do we experience the experience?
Yes. and take ownership for our experience.
Yes,
That's not being done to us.
exactly.
It's a set of circumstances, and we get to adjudicate what is right for us or not. And there's a responsibility inside of that, but that responsibility
Whichever choice.
removes the narrative.
It removes the narrative, and the biggest narrative I feel that it removes is victimization.
Yes.
They're doing it to me.
Yes,
I'm
done to me.
helpless, and they're doing this to me.
Absolutely.
And I remember, you know how for all the trainings and the studying and the learning and the years of working on ourselves that we have done, I am sometimes amazed at the simple truths that have been there all along. And I didn't notice them. You know, what can I say? So one of the ones
Yes.
that finally occurred to me was that whole one about I didn't have a choice. And really, we always, 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 no matter how bad the situation is, we always have a choice. We may not like the choices, but there's always a choice. And there's that old phrase, between a rock and a hard spot.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes I think that's kind of where we are. So what narrative are we going to choose?
Yes.
And what kind of a future do we create? Like with our next breath, when we're talking to each other, what future are we creating?
Yeah, with our next breath, with our next thought, with our next word, with our next action. Like they're compounding minute by minute by minute.
Yes.
I think when you recognize that, then you recognize that you do hold the power of your own future. Yes, there may be constraints, considerations, things that have to be respected. But like you said, there's still choice. There's choice. There's always choice. And when we live in the choice, well, I guess we can choose a narrative. I almost said when we live in the choice, we can't live in the narrative. No, we could choose the narrative. That is a choice.
That's our narrative, actually.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
We just picked a different one, you know?
Yeah. So creating the future now means, can you bring that home for people who maybe that's a new concept for? I know you've talked about, you know, the thoughts, but you specifically talked about the words and the words that you choose and the way that you direct your words. That's a creation.
Yes.
You know, energetically, you're planting seeds. You're planting a garden with those words.
I think of you could make it. It isn't like you have to change your whole life in a moment. You could say to yourself, I'm going to replace 2 words in my thoughts. So instead of he made me or she made me, all you have to do is change made to choose. My mother, it was really important to my mother that I show up for Thanksgiving. So I thought about it and I chose to go ahead and go. Now that's different than saying my mom pulled a guilt trip on me and made me come.
Exactly.
So in the one future, you're the victim and you give the responsibility for the outcome to somebody else. My mom made me do it. I couldn't do anything about it. I had to go. And in the other one, yes, other people wanted me to do these certain things. I had other things. I chose to do this. Now you're not a victim. Now you made the future. You made the choice.
Yes.
And you can start with basic things like substituting made for choose, substituting have to for consider or decide, substituting the word try. I'll try and get there. or I'll come, or that doesn't work for me. Can we make another plan for a different day? In the one, you're the victim, you're enduring it, you have to do it. And it's, even as I talk about it, I can feel this kind of,
Whoa, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And how much better it is. And you can literally feel it physically inside of yourself. If you sit here and go, Jeanne, you say, Linda, can you come over for dinner? And I go, I'll try and make it. Whenever I do that, I can feel my insides collapse.
Yes.
And the difference between saying that and saying, Jeannie, I'd love to come. I'll be there. Or, you know, it doesn't work for me to come today. Thank you. Can we make a plan for a different day?
Yes.
All of a sudden, it's not, now it's as if you're stepping into the future by changing the words you use to think with.
Mm.
And is it everything? No. It is a step, and it's one under your control with your next thought. That's, to me, what's so exciting about tending to the language we think to ourselves in, and then what we put out in the world. Because when we do that, it changes our relationship with the people we're talking to. And I used to think that I was a master of language because I had a big vocabulary. I have a big vocabulary. And what I discovered was that in the end, the words that changed my life were not the big ones. The words that have changed my experience and my relationship with my life are the little words.
Mm.
Changing try to will.
Yes.
Changing have to I decide or choose. And it is as if all of a sudden my whole relationship with my life changed. Not only with my past, it changed the way I think about my past. And now when I trot out stories, and I love stories, I recognize both the wisdom embedded in the story and the way I can use my language differently.
Mm.
So that now the story isn't about having life happen to me. It's about my relationship with my life. And, you know, you are one of the people who modeled that for me in your recent class. I was so excited when you talked about the language of love. It was like this little piece that's really a great big piece.
It is.
And I had never heard it framed like that. So the way that you framed it was like opening a door. And all of a sudden, I could see something about all of my relationships, past, present, and into the future, about the way in which I show people I love them.
Mm.
And that may work for them or it may not. And they may actually never know I love them because that's not the language they speak.
Yeah, they don't hear it. They don't receive it because it's like you're speaking Spanish to someone who
exactly
only speaks French. Yes, it's very true.
But that gift in that class and teaching that piece, it allowed me to have an even deeper understanding of my relationship with my parents. After all these years. You know, my father's been gone for 33 years and my mom for 28. However, they're still with me.
Yes.
And my relationship with them is still with me. And that night in that class allowed me to transform those relationships even more than I already had, to give me a peace and an awareness and a compassion for myself and for them.
Did it change the narrative?
Absolutely.
That's amazing.
So, and you know how powerful it is when Yvonne tells the story of how I must have spent 3 TRs working on my relationship with my mother. And she finally said to me one time, she said, "Do you really want to do this one more time?" So I finally feel like I can truthfully say, I'm done.
That's so wonderful.
It
You know,
is.
that is a great example of the importance of parking the past. We talked about in one of the previous conversations that came up with parking the past. It might have been the one with Zoe Martin, and just how important that is. You know, part of parking the past is leaving the narrative, the story we created around the thing, leaving it in the past, not dragging it forward. Otherwise, we are creating, whether we're intentionally creating the future in what we do now, or whether we, by default, just continue creating unaware, we are creating the future.
Yes.
Through every choice of every moment. And sometimes people, I had someone tell me once, "Oh my gosh, I can't even contemplate that. That's way too much responsibility." And you know, it sounds like it is, as in being responsible is more work.
Mm-hmm.
The truth is, once you make the shift, it's less work.
I agree.
Because you're not dragging, you're not,
Well,
it is fresh every day. And like you had those emotions
yeah.
that you spoke of where you woke up and you just, but you honored it. You honored it. You didn't block it. You didn't stuff it in a closet or under a rug and pretend it wasn't there. You literally honored it. And I know you, and I know you ask, you seek the, you ask the question behind the question behind the question. You know, you look for the emotion, right? The governing emotion that's under that until you get to the point where you can point to it and say, ah, that's it. And there is a certain amount of courage required to do that, but it can also become a muscle when exercised regularly. It just becomes a new default, a new operating basis that carries us way more confidently to create the future that we want.
Well, and you know, gee, what was now 70 years ago or so, Harry Truman used to have a little sign on his desk that said, "The buck stops here."
Yes.
So when we drag our narrative of the past and we tell it to ourselves over and over again, it's like we're feeding it, nurturing it, and
yes,
keeping it alive. And what it allows us to do is put the responsibility for the outcome back there somewhere.
yes.
And I love stories of the past. The past has taught me so many things, and I do go back and revisit them because I learn new things from those experiences.
Yes.
However, there's a difference between using it as a reference library.
Yes.
And using it as a car that you're driving forward into the future in.
Absolutely.
So I think that people who long to have their life be different, who long for some kind of a change, I would really invite them not to look for the big things. That it isn't about, you know, the light bulb that goes off and everything gets illuminated and all of a sudden you have this revelation. And you might have one. I mean, I've had those. I'm sure you have too. However, the enduring changes for me,
yes,
always came one breath at a time.
Yes.
One thought at a time. And do I slack off every once in a while and have totally unworthy, unkind, petty, selfish thoughts? Yes. However, I recognize that's what they are.
Yeah.
And it makes a difference when I can say, oh, you're doing it again.
I call it my autocorrector. You know, like if you ever type a text and it wants to think for you, or sometimes it's right on.
Right,
Sometimes you're like, no, I just don't want there. But I think eventually you self-correct.
Yes.
You know the difference between living how you used to live and then living with this new, fresh, intentional experience. And when you do default to the old, you can recognize it because the discrepancy is considerable, measurable.
Yes.
And then you can, and have there been times where I've stayed in it longer than I should and maybe even dramatized it a little bit? But here's the thing, over time, I would recognize that.
Yeah.
And I would be like, okay, Jeannie, you're just bringing a bit too much vibrato here, right? It's like, because there's times when you really get in the narrative and you literally feel like you are on a stage and it is a performance, and you can go to that. And it's really funny when you progress on this road and you make these choices, and then you start to recognize and select, no, I've gone there enough. You know what I mean?
No.
Thank you and no. Exactly. And it's really, it's really fun every now and then to find, there still are those things. I'm
Yeah.
not walking on water yet, although I would love to be able to do that. That would be amazing. But
Yeah.
I've not mastered that. But I will tell you that even in the stages of mastery, there are things that come up that sometimes surprise you.
Yes.
They surprise you in that, whoa, there's still something there underneath
I
all
know,
that.
exactly. Like, where were you hiding? I thought I got rid of you a long time ago.
But you know what? It's not, you catch it very quickly
Yes.
most of the time. I chuckle, this is okay, wow, there's something more here. And it's so interesting because what was perceived as this constrictive, whatever the story was, and I'm going to relate it to 2020. How many people are like, oh, thank God this year is over. You know what? No, this was a year of tremendous revelation. And
I agree.
too many of the people that I associate with have offered that on their own, that there was an opportunity here. And
Yes.
in any adversity, there is an opportunity of equal or greater magnitude. And in looking back on 2020, for anybody who right now, and I know there are people who have lost people this year. There are people whose own health is challenged, people whose careers ended or jobs ended, or who knows, any number of things. Marriages are marginalized because of the,
You can't get away
immersion, really, because you have to reinvent. There's a lot of reinvention. There is that thing, survival of the fittest. And I think that as a community, there has to be that thinking where how can we leverage what we now know to reinvent something greater than what we've invented up until this time.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's the opportunity. And I think there are going to be those that listen to this and they go, oh, absolutely right on. There's going to be some that listen and they go, I don't get that at all. and you know what? All of it is okay, because it is an opportunity on any individual's respective journey. What you said, what you communicated will reach the ears and help those that it is meant to help.
Well, it will. And sometimes they may not hear it now.
Yes.
However, the person who heard it may share it and they may hear it then.
Yes. Or they may be reminded of it. Wait, that was from you pre-paved something that then opened the door down
it's like
the line
a preview
for them
of
to
coming
receive.
attraction.
Yes, absolutely. What does Yvonne say? The future speaks.
Yes, leaves clues. The future
leaves clues. Thank you.
And
what I was going to say with that, any closing any closing
No,
comments to end us out?
I could talk with you for hours. We could run right over everybody
We're
else.
knocking on 45 minutes already.
I know. So that would be, if I'll take the if back. My desire for everyone is that in every moment that you focus on what is the opportunity here in this moment. What can I learn? What does it tell me? What information is it giving me that I can use to change? Because every breath is a moment for that. And in that moment, you can change. And if you don't change in that breath, there's always the next breath. You know, it's endless opportunities.
That's
There's
beautiful.
no shelf life on this.
That's beautiful. Thank
So,
you, Linda.
Jeannie, thank you. It's a wonderful gift that you're giving.
Well, we all are. It's an amazing collaboration today. So thank you for being your part in helping row the boat for this last 45 minutes. It was awesome.
It's been my honor to take a turn at the oars with you.
That's awesome. And Merry Christmas to you.
And same to you, and blessings for a wonderful new and even more exciting and growth-filled new year.
Thank you. And to you.
Thank you.